Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.
So 3 rounds in to what is an all-important championship here with the brand new Gen 3 Supercars here on iRacing, and it has produced possibly some of the strongest fields we have seen in a very long time. It's been the Brody Kostecki show over the last 2 rounds of championship racing, and then in round 1, Richie Stanaway decided he wanted to bring himself into play. But when it comes to round 4, there's no Brody Kostecki here today, so it will be up to Stanaway to make the charge. No Cody Deeth either. So the question is, it's a brand new winner. Who's going to find it around Brands Hatch here in Forcombe in Kent? Welcome to all of you watching, of course, with us on iRacing and with us here at SimSpeed TV. My name is Jake Sperry. Alongside with me for the ride today is Scott Rankin, Jay Kennedy on production as we get ourselves ready for sim racing action on what is your Monday night for your V8 out there. And Scott, when it comes to Brands Hatch, it's a very known quantity. It has stayed pretty much in exactly its same guise since the 1970s, this Grand Prix layout, but it's a track which has a lot of touring legacy to go along with it, and one of the best opening corners in all of motorsport.
Best opening corners, worst opening corners. I mean, it's a thing of opinions. I'll give you something actually, Jake, is I tend to hate this track. I've never really loved it. It's narrow. I feel really claustrophobic. Even though there's a lot of room all the way off to the walls, you tend to run all the way out to the walls as soon as you dip a tire off. So I've always hated this place because it just made me go, oh, I've got to be super precise. I've never had that talent. Enter the Gen 3. This track, I've raced it a couple of times this week. I love it. The racing is really, really difficult. You've got to be smart. You've got to harass. This is a psychological track. You've got to be there. You've got to make yourself present in everybody's mirrors, and you've got to be constantly applying the pressure. Pass is hard to come by, but that is where the strategy kicks in. Get ready for the undercut to be strong tonight. Well, that could change things a lot. You had a strategy race last week, no fuel stops. This week, completely different.
Yeah, this is going to be an all-important one in terms of strategy. There is that one stop, but you look at that pit entry, it is one of the more difficult pit entries out there, out of the Jim Clark curve, so you're going to have to be keeping your eyes very fixed on that. Your overtaking zones up into Druid's Corner, turn 2. It's going to be one of the best places to get a pass, and then down Pilgrim's Drop over the top of Hawthorne Hill and into Hawthorne's Corner itself. That might be the place where you can go and get some moves done. If you're desperate, Clark Curve is a place, but as you can see here from the map, it's not necessarily built with long straights in mind. You're going to have to maybe work an overtake here or there outright, so you're going to have to keep that in mind as these drivers all sit about and put themselves in their best possible places. Now let's talk championship walking into today, round 4. This is the strength of field race, so to speak, out there. So this is where we expect the strongest points to be scored here in your iRacing Championship, which Brody Kostecki holds a 70-point advantage there, or thereabouts, 73 to be precise, over Jared Filsell. Madison Down finding himself in 3rd position ahead of Robbie Gibbs and Matthew Bowler, with Brady Myers falling back down the order into 6th position. Remember, you've got 4 drop rounds in this championship. Thomas McMillan finds himself in 7th ahead of Luke Rosella, with Brenton Hobson in 9th, and Richie Stanaway rounding out the top 10 on 626 championship points, looking to try and push himself up the order here with tonight's racing. But in terms of a championship, it is one of the more unique ones here in iRacing, where, of course, having those 4 drop rounds gives you a lot of space to go and work with, especially when you consider where we have been and where we're going. So from here, it's to Mancor next week and Indianapolis the week after that, January 27th. So those 2 tracks coming back off of Brands Hatch means you're going to be in a very similar style of field. And then you got the Motor City, Detroit, Belle Isle.
Yeah, get those walls. We were talking about maybe feeling claustrophobic. You're going to feel claustrophobic when you get to Detroit Belle Isle. I think the really, really good thing that I think we've done here, and I'm going to say big shot props to the guys that put this calendar together, is this is a calendar that really says, okay, we're going to test the car here. We're really going to challenge you guys. And you're right, Brands Hatch, flowing, it's got a real rhythm style to it. Circus Never's Magni Course. It's going to be all about stomping on those brakes, getting your straight line braking done, and then you're probably going to tinker with the brake bias throughout the lap to trail brake through some of the longer dragging corners. So that's going to change up a little bit. Straight line speed at Indianapolis, always a big thing. But there's a lot here on this calendar, and the fact that we're already 4 weeks into a new season, new generation of car, man, it feels like yesterday we were just unpacking this thing and tinkering with it for the first time. I can't believe we're already a month into having this car.
Yeah, and so there's been a lot of development and a lot of change as drivers have worked out what works and what doesn't here. Qualifying currently underway. They've got the traditional 8 minutes or 2 laps to get themselves sorted. It's a 33-lap race that they will be dealing with today. So they will have a long, long way in terms of trying to put their times in. And as you can see here with the session, you've got a pit window out there, and we're reckoning between about laps 9 and 24 is the best place to make those stops. But I would say about lap 20, 21 might be the best time to come in and make a stop. I don't know about you, Scott.
Yeah, look, I mean, the thing is, the tires hang on relatively well around here. We're not putting in a supreme amount of load and whatnot through them. All the corners are generally not as mega loaded as you would have seen at some of the other courses that we've been on so far. And the other thing, track temperature at the moment is 22.8 degrees Celsius, relatively cold. That's going to mean the tires are going to hang on to a little bit. That means you can go for a little bit more of an aggressive strategy. The biggest thing about Brands Hatch, track position, track position, track position. This is one of the toughest to overtake courses on the calendar, and we've already seen how difficult it has been to overtake with the new formula. So, undercut, I think you've got to come in a little bit early. I think 21's probably a touch late. I'm probably coming in about 16, 17. Honestly, if I'm there and I need to throw the dice, and it's going to be a game of, all right, I want to be the first one to come, but I don't want to come too early, but everyone's going to follow me down the next lap because, well, they have to.
Yeah, and we just had a look at qualifying. It was at one stage 1,000th between the top drivers out there of Jared Filsell and Madison Down. Madison improved to a 4:05, but then Jared Filsell responded with a 26.37 and is 300ths clear up at the top. Watching Richie Stanaway now dropping down Dingle Dell and up the hill looking for the Sheen curve, this jutting right-hander, which very much is all about carrying the speed, attacking the curve into Sterling's corner here. 90-degree left after 3 straight right-hand bends, which gives a little bit of reprieve to those left-hand side tyres, and then the run to the Jim Clark curve, which ends on the lap 130 kilometers an hour through the corner, and always having to turn while you put the power down on the exit. You just got to be very tentative as you go, and over the line, a 27.6 opener in terms of a lap is nowhere, is 24th position for Richie Stanaway. A lot of work to do in this lap 2 up the hill in towards Druids Corner.
That says to me, maybe he's made a big mistake on that one. The tyres generally aren't there on the second lap. Well, that was the big thing about the Gen 2 car, wasn't it? You only had 1 lap worth of pace. The tyres are there and thereabouts, but they're still not peak performance. You can still get a lap out of them. Maybe if Richie sort of looked after that tyre on the first lap, hasn't pressed for everything out of the tyre, then yes, maybe he made the mistake very, very early on, cooled the tyres off throughout the remainder of the lap, but he pressed on quite a little bit, didn't he? So I'm not expecting much from this second lap. Just keeping an eye on Robbie Gibbs. I want to say big props to Robbie Gibbs as well. Sits 7th in terms of qualifying. I think this is his 3rd lap in qualifying, so this one actually won't count. But the big thing about Robbie is he wasn't there last year. He really didn't have a lot of pace about him. He managed to get a big result at one point throughout the 2024 calendar if you were following all the big league results. And he got really, really lucky to get that result. New car, new generation. Robbie's put a lot of work in, and look at the names he's sitting around in terms of championship contention. I think it was 4th in terms of the championship. So he's right there, and this new car really, really suiting him. And he's not known as the lead driver for Evolution Racing Team. That has been historically Ethan Greig Gold. Could see a changing of the guard at Evolution Racing Team.
We very much could. Stanaway across the line, 26.72. That's good enough for the 4th row of the grid, and he'll take that in the number 8 car. He has matched his number in terms of his qualifying. Jordan Ross is the only other driver who can set a time, and he's 5th fastest at the moment. And as he crosses the line, that one won't count, and as such, he will remain in the 5th position overall. So that will mark qualifying down here at Brands Hatch, and it is Jared Filsell who is looking to try and capitalise as we watch right in front of the Kentagon out there at the moment. You got to love a little bit of humour here at Brands Hatch. You got Jared Filsell on pole position, and alongside him for company is Madison Down. These two know each other. They've raced forever against each other outright. James Scott will go from 3rd position on the grid, and Rehan Lianaj will be alongside him in the number 1 car in position number 4. It is then Jordan Ross who lines up 5th alongside Dylan Rudd on row 3 of the grid, and then row 4, cars 7 and 8, RP 7 and 8, Robbie Gibbs and Richie Stanaway find themselves alongside each other. Row 5 sees Thomas McMillan. He's going to go in the Lightning McQueen helmet from 9th position, along with Dennis Gatterick, who is there for Synergy, the first of the Synergy cars, there in 10th. It's followed by his teammate Wayne Burke, who's got Matt Morris there in 12th position, looking to give some chase. Jack Willis lines up on row 7 in 13th position with Brian Borg. It's the 2 racecraft simulation cars who house that 7th row. It's then Ryan Jones who puts himself in 15th position. Good qualifying for him, with Michael Taliancic out there in 16th position. First start we've seen of him this season, with Paul Young and James Chastity having to go from 18th position. Row 10 sees Rain Campbell and Steve Jansen there on the grid, with 21st belonging to Ross Rizzo and Ryan Bettis there in 22nd, with a little bit of work to do. You've then got Rob Bowden there on row 12. He's got Jackson Freer for company, and here's a surprise for the books there. You've got 2nd in the IndyCar Championship last year, the king of chins, some would say, Philip Kraus, who's going from 25th. He's got Thomas Freeman alongside him in 26th. The last 3 drivers are Ben Morris, William Brown, and 1 driver failing to set a time, and surprisingly, it was Blake Warboys who's going to have to go from the back of the field after he had a very good showing at Navarra before bad luck befell him, so he'll have to try and charge through. But it is a very congested start to this race that we're expecting. It's going to be some wonderful battling. We've got 2 of the best that sim racing has to offer on the front row of this grid, and the lights out and we're underway. Remember, there's a small tilt from right to left then as you go down towards Paddock Hill Bend, and it looks like Philsell's got an absolute stormer of a start. They'll fall into line. Scott in 3rd, Lianaj in 4th, and then there's going to be everyone trying to tiptoe their way down, and look at the way they're battling up into the Druids corner here. Some side-by-sides all the way down the pack, and the key is that Stanaway got a good launch because he was really attacking Dylan Rudd off the start, and they still attacked to Graham Hill.
Yeah, all the way around. It's tough to go too wide. It's Matt Morris and Ryan Jones that were going down through Graham Hill too wide. Now you're going to have a look at Rod. He's going to cross back over, trying to go down the inside. Remember what I said? You've got to harass. It's difficult to get the overtake done, so you've got to take every opportunity. The big thing, not much wheel spin. I didn't see a whole bunch of smoke from the start line. This is the shortest gear ratio we've had in this car thus far this season, and that says these guys have already mastered those starts.
They certainly have, as we watch Michael Taliancic turn, and there goes James Chastanerf. He bounces into the barriers. Taliancic hard off right, but avoids contact, but not the start for James Chastanerf, as he just finds himself ran over at the front into Hawthorne's corner. It's so easy to do. It's the biggest braking zone on the track with the exclusion of Paddock Hill Bend.
Yeah, it's difficult. You got to line yourself up. You got to flow. You got to hug the curb all the way through, and you just can't carry too much speeding, because once you're a touch offline, pick up a little bit of grass on the outside. Maybe you can recover it at any more than just a touch of grass on the outside. You're going to be sailing off. So it's just about lining yourself up. Obviously, a little bit of a mistake there. Now, who's going to be the big movers and shakers? Jack Whittis grabbed himself 3 spots in the opening lap. Paul Young grabbed 2. He was one of the cars that was in that 3 wide situation. He was looking at. Whoa!
Dylan Rudd has just given the bump over to Jordan Ross, and he's got himself through over at turn 2 at Druid. So he's just done enough to make the pass, and he got the chrome horn out and said, I'm going to push my way through, and he managed it. And Jordan Ross is not going to be happy. He defended the line, and that's why got a wiggle out of Paddock Hill Bend, went to cover it, and Dylan Rudd just pushed him.
Well, I mean, there was an opportunity there, and Rudd, again, overtaking's going to come at a premium. That's the overtaking opportunity, and probably the only one he's going to get all night. So he had to go for it, and Ross sort of half covered him. And there was a hole there. That's what I'm saying at the end of the day. There was a hole there. He didn't cover it completely, but yeah, Ross will be a little bit dirty with himself for that.
Yeah, he's left the door open. He did enough to keep Richie Stanaway at bay with Robbie Gibbs, Thomas McMillan, Jack Whittis is there, Dennis Gatterick, Matt Morris, Ryan Jones, Wayne Burke, and Paul Young, and you could even say Brian Borg's on the back of this group as well. So it go all the way back to about 18th position here as they go through. We'll take a look at the start here and what happened with James Chastanerf. So he gets the pass through, but he starts losing the back end. And Taliancic basically has no time to react to the fact that Chastanerf has just let the rear loop.
Well, you can see it on the way in, and I mean, he's diving in there, and it was looking like a crossover. Tally went, okay, well, I've got to yield this one, and he's looking to try and get the cross back, stay close to him. Keep your eyes on the dirt and dust coming out of Paddock Hill Bend as well. There's a really, really strong opportunity, particularly as the tyres fall off, to them to just dip a wheel off right there, pick up some gravel, carry it in. The thing is, getting down here into turn 2, into Druids, you can carry a lot of dirt and debris on. I've seen a lot of dusty, dirty races, locked brakes. This is one of the strongest visualizations that I've seen thus far for the new debris system. You get a lot of dust, a lot of debris, and the braking performance of these cars significantly compromised if it gets dirty down there.
Yep, so you're going to have to keep dialing back the brake marker, and that gets it tougher and tougher, because the more that you start running off, the more difficult it gets. On board with Blake Warboys here on the view that you could have if you join iRacing today and get yourself in. There's brand new memberships available for you, 25% off if you've got a brand new membership to iRacing. And Blake Warboys continuing to see Jackson Freer in front, and the train, you would say, currently being led by Ryan Bettis here in 21st position. Steve Janssen, Rob Bowden, all these drivers here want to try and get themselves a little bit of a hit, and the Freer Academy car, watch out, little look at Sterling's corner. Now, that's not the traditional place you make a pass because it's such a short shoot run, but you look further in front, and Ryan Bettis has just lost out. Steve Janssen's got the move done.
Yeah, and watching Bettis, so I've had an opportunity to race against Bettis the last couple of weeks. Quite strong early on in the stint, then fades a little bit. And I think that's what's going on here. He's just hit that crest of the tyre, but he's really, really strong. Could have overworked the fronts, could have overworked the rears a little bit. Looks like he's struggling for a little bit turning in. It's quite balanced in the rear end of the car, so I think he just might have overworked the fronts.
Yeah, take a little look at SimSpeed replay here, just pushing a little bit there, getting a wiggle through the Jim Clark curve. Not often that you get to see that out on circuit, and descending down the hill now into Graham Hill Bend. Turn 3, out on circuit and running through what is the Indy layout here until you reach turn number 4, out on circuit here. This is Surtees' corner, and then after dealing with John Surtees, so to speak, you then back up the hill and taking the rise onto the back half of the circuit. Janssen holding his ground, and everybody stuck at about a car length away from each car in front. Not enough to make that launch down Pilgrim's Drop and into Hawthorne's corner, so they have to play the patience game and be a little bit more positive out there and try and get and settle into a rhythm. Might be one of the few circuits out there that you sit and look at, Scott, and say, well, this is the perfect track where I can't overtake because I can settle down into the fuel game and let someone at the front of the field do the donkey work.
Yeah, there's not like last week where there was an opportunity to run a no-stop race. But yeah, you can save a little bit of fuel. I was just keeping an eye on, I was talking about Robert Gibbs a little bit earlier on. Have a look at the right rear corner of that car. He's actually got a little bit of a touch-up. He's quicker than McMillan, but he just can't find any way around. So this has got a really, really good opportunity. This is two guys that know their craft that are going to work right here. So he'll race him. All right, McMillan's dipped a wheel off. Now McMillan's got a cover. Didn't cover it. Sweet, straight down the inside.
Oh, that's a heavy bit of contact there. And Robbie gives himself the door as he goes through, making sure he passes Thomas McMillan there. Jack Widders sat on the back, had a look at it, but just that a look. But that was a big, big move. And I'm not sure Robbie Gibbs got that slowed up as much as he wanted to.
No, it just snaps sideways. The other thing about these cars is as they run through the stint, what you'll actually find is they work the downshift later and later and later into the corners. They'll hang on to particularly the downshift third to second gear is the big one you've got to be very, very careful of. And that's right where Gibbs's car snaps sideways. As he went for second. The problem is when you're going for a dive bomb move like that, you really got to use the engine braking to pull the car up. That's the rear end of the car goes away from you. You can't get through those gears as quickly.
Well, this is Jackson Freer here looking over towards the inside at Druids. He absolutely throws it down the inside, but he locks up the rear axle, takes a tap from Blake Warboys, and then has the likes of Thomas McMillan trying to go around the outside of him. Warboys continued on his fight, actually, trying to get it sorted around the outside. Didn't quite manage it, but that just goes to show you how easy it is to lock up, because you think that this is a track with a lot of braking, with a low average top speed, that it's going to be easy to go through. These cars are very difficult through the mid part of the corner.
And remember, we were talking at the start about how critical it was to get off and get away with a shorter gear ratio. Well, the converse is true. More torque. When you shorten that gear ratio up, more torque in the lower gears. Basically, doing some testing at Magny-Cours for next week, not using first gear even at Magny-Cours, and that's got one of the sharpest hairpins that you're likely to see on the service. So second gear is as low as you're going to get. That's exactly the gear they're using through Druids Bend, and it's that last downshift into second gear. That's the critical one where you can really lock it up. But one of the big things that, like I said, I was watching all the front end guys. I was watching Phil Sells, Kostecki, that gear shifting later and later and later as the tyres get more and more worn. And tyres, gotta look after those tyres. Every little bit of what the drivers term micro slip that you can cut out, that's critical. It's not the big slides, because you can generally get away with that with your driving technique. It's the micro slip. That's the difference between the big guys.
Cold conditions then we just saw on the bottom right hand side of your screen, just the 23 Celsius or the 73 degrees Fahrenheit that it is at the moment. Worth keeping in mind, there was a mistake at turn 1 for Madison Down over that last lap. That's why the gaps crawled out from 1 to 1.2 seconds. He went too deep through Paddock Hill Bend. So now Jared Filser with a margin. We focus on Thomas McMillan here, with Jack Widders behind, with, of course, Robbie Gibbs in front. And they can't afford to be too aggressive with the way they make these moves, because they'll see Richie Stanaway run away. They'll see Jordan Ross off in the distance, and they won't be able to catch them if they continue to think about just themselves and the race on for P8.
Yeah, but how much do you save? How much do you press on? So the battle for the lead, probably gone. That's probably Phil Sells right now. But this is a huge opportunity. Whoa, check this out. McMillan wants to return a serve. He's got an opportunity. He's fired up. He's been elbowed out of the way. And this is a driver who's red hot in the cockpit.
He is, because he's taking a very shallow line through Graham Hill, and he might have a lunge here at Surtees. He will. He throws it all the way in. Robbie Gibbs opens up the steering, and he blocks him as well. Here comes Jack Widders to take advantage of that, and he'll box in Robbie Gibbs and try and get that move sorted. Now there's nowhere to go, and they both get the launch down Pilgrim's Drop. This is a battle of brakes they go through. Gibbs throws it into the corner. Widders has to open the steering and relent. Brilliant stuff there by Robbie Gibbs to hold.
And that says to me that that's the Lobs Esports setup really good on its long run tyres. So Gibbs has got pace, he's got speed, but the setup, just the ability to look after the tyres, not quite there. And again, it's not crawling around in the rear, it's the fronts he's having problems with. So it's something to do with the braking. He might be screwing some extra rear bias into that car. And that's, how good is that? Because for the longest time that we've been looking at the Gen 2 chassis, it's all about conserving your rear tyre. Now it's become conserving both ends of the car. You've got to look after the heat, the temperatures, and the wear.
Yeah, this is how far Madison Down went off the circuit. And when we talk about mistakes here in your iRacing Supercars C-Class, we're talking tiny, tiny margins at the front of the field. And that's just all four wheels off the circuit once. And that's 0.2 of a second gone. It's tough to get back. Another little look to the inside from Robbie Gibbs. This is really heating up. And look at how it stacks up behind. Because behind Jack Widders, you've got Dennis Gatterick, Matt Morris, Ryan Jones, and Wayne Burke. And Paul Young as well wants to get it. In fact, you could say it goes all the way down to Philip Kraus. This isn't a battle pack. This is a battle artillery.
Yeah, this feels a little bit like the front lines of a medieval battle, and the only thing we're throwing at each other is big roaring V8 engines, cars with not all that much grip, and they're wriggling them all over the circuit. Critical to the driving style of this car and the new chassis. Oh, Robbie, well, he thinks he's still quick enough to go back after McMillan, so maybe McMillan, in getting past Gibbs, has worn those tyres off. He's right there. Okay, the big critical factor, the next time we go through Druid's Corner, keep an eye on it. These guys, normally one of the things that a coach is going to sit down and teach you, use all the track where it's available. They're not doing that. When they drive off Druid's Corner, they're trying to drive it off really shallow, really straight, save those rear tyres. You don't want to track out because you're just going to wheel spin if you do.
Yep, so they're trying to get the path of earliest power here as we take a look. This is Matt Morris here who's running himself then through and in towards that next right-hander. And look at that in the back, a massive slide as he went through. He's lucky to keep Ryan Jones out of it. Wayne Burke sidled his way on through as well. So 2 loss for Matt Morris and a bit more work for him to go and start chasing back down. There's now, here comes the looks out because 4th is suddenly starting to heat up. James Scott, this would actually be for the podium here, is starting to get a little bit under the cosh. He can't keep the same pace that Mads can in front of him, Madison Down, and so Rehan Lianaj is just waiting for his chance. A driver who surely is the most touted and earmarked talent in Australia and New Zealand and the Oceania region today, who could go on to have an absolutely sensational sim racing career.
Yeah, we'll have a look at the likes of a recent big talent that's come through from the younger ranks, and Damon Woods and what he's been able to do. But the thing is, different career paths, and this is it. He's following in the footsteps of Madison Down. He's taken so much on from what has been such a legendary figure. But the other thing is, this is the start of a new era for James Scott just ahead of him. Teamless at the start of the year. I can tell you, he's chatted to a bunch of different teams. Still not sure where he's going to end up yet. It could be literally anywhere. And that makes me very excited because that says, look at the 3 cars at the front of this race. Look at the 4 cars at the front of this race. 4 different teams for the guys that are in and amongst that. How cool is that? Last year was dominated by Lobs Esports. We're heading into a new generation, Jake, and that fills me with excitement for what we've got for the next 12 months.
It really does, so we'll take another look. Oh, get all of the drift there in front of Philip Kraus, who now gets the run. That's Ross Rizzo, who had himself that slide, and Rizzo did lose out that spot going through the early stages. Rudd getting really close then to the back of Lianaj for position, but again, struggling to find it here on lap 10 of 33. Pit window is officially open, and the one driver that we have seen be, I would say, the most aggressive when it comes to coming in early just so happens to be in P2 right now, Madison Down. I wonder if he's learned from those experiences and those, some would say, mistakes that he's had in those races and go, you know what, I'm just going to take the conventional strategy this time by and go a little bit deeper. Some might like to go 50-50 in this race, have the best of both, but I'm expecting these drivers to go quite a bit later as we watch the Camaro giving chase there over onto that driver, Rehan Lianaj, who is there in position number 4 in his Mustang.
Yeah, and a lot of that, well, there's a lot of debate, and there's a lot of debate circling actually about these cars in the real world at the moment. Do they get ARBs, adjustable ARBs in the back? And you can see the dust and the debris that's been kicked up. Jordan Ross, is that a send? Big send.
That's a very nice send. That's Wayne Burke. So a wonderful pass there. He got that done right. Oh, and straight back down. Matt Morris, he wasn't going to wait in there for a moment at the Jim Clark curve. Caught him at the most vulnerable moment there. Just lost the place. And he sniped another one. 2 in 2 corners for Ryan Jones. Now, that is what you call a headache.
Yeah, he's starting to drift a little bit as well. We've just had more contact down towards the tail end of the field as well. It looks like it's Rob Bowden and Thomas Freeman. Let's keep your eyes on this one.
Oh, Freeman gets down. Oh, and that's not much. That's really not much. Headlights go, but that's just a shot to the back just to push him out the way, Scott.
Yeah, and again, opportunism. Look, Freeman's not going to get an opportunity, and particularly as these tyres start to wear, the opportunities go away. You need a tyre offset, basically. one of the big things I'm seeing again with these sorts of cars is it's you go for a move, and if you can't get it done, that's when you're vulnerable. We saw that a little bit ago with Ryan Jones, just getting, you know, in the wrong sort of spot, gets elbowed off. He just became vulnerable, and that's when you just really, really get pounced on. And I think it was a little bit the same. Bowden was just trying to creep forward, made a tiny, tiny little mistake. Freeman's got to take it. He just has to take it because it's not going to come again.
On board with Ryan Campbell in the Blackout 1 Performance Racing car. Big slide in front. You can see the smoke. That's going to be Matt Morris again, who's pushing the boundary of the tyre a bit too much. He locks up through Sterling's, and that's going to allow Paul Young to make the move. Now it brings in Brian Borg. The Bryborg wants to try and find an overtake. He lunges down to the inside and gets it. Nowhere to go for Ryan Campbell, who almost gives a shot there to the back. But look at that. Another horrible lap for Matt Morris, who drops down the equivalent of 3 places on that lap with a 129, throws it straight back at Paddock Hill Bend. Brian Borg has no power through the middle of the corner. Here comes Ryan Campbell, who just gets checked slightly.
Yeah, and it's again, little bits and pieces. How good is this, though? This is the best I've actually seen out of Brian Borg in the last 12 months. He's starting to really find a rhythm with this new car. I think that says a lot about the Oceanic community. We've just been sitting, we've been waiting, we've been in this holding pattern, waiting for a new era car. Look at the resurgence of a whole bunch of drivers that have been coming back out of the woodwork. Look at the names that are coming from Real World Motorsport. They're jumping in, getting on board the cars that they're going racing, going toe-to-toe with, and they want to get out there. They want to get every little ounce of practice, preparation, race time that they possibly can. Sim racing's the best way to go. This is such a big, great advert for our sport. I cannot tell you how great this is. The shot in the arm the Australian community needed.
Well, I tell you what, it's more than that, Scott. It's the international drivers who've been jumping in.
Oh,
We've
yeah.
seen Yuan Lin, who's arguably one of the greatest sim racers out there from the United States and China. You've got the likes there of Philip Kraus, IndyCar runner-up in the world there, and he is your biggest mover in the field, up 7. We've had Jacob Reed, the 2-time iRacing Grand Prix World Tour champion, in and racing a couple rounds of this championship already. It has caught the imagination of so many drivers, and it can catch the imagination of anybody who wants to try and put themselves in at the highest level. The charge continues again then along this very nice sloping front stretch over towards Paddock Hill Bend, and Brian Borg in 16th position, keeping himself there in the Racecraft Simulations car. -2 though for the day, and looking behind at Ryan Campbell, who gets a little bit into the mirrors, trying to make the car slightly wider. And you know what? He almost got a result for it here, because he'll dive down the inside, but it's the outside for Graham Hill, so he needs to switch back.
Yeah, he's going to try and find it too. Look at the damage to the front end of Ryan Campbell. A little bit of music that's been tapped out with the nose of that car. Surtees might be his best opportunity. Didn't quite get the drive he needed. Borg just covered him nicely. And again, why do the drivers like these sorts of cars? It's because a couple of reasons. Number 1, driver's car. Number 2, it comes down to punch and counter punch. Block, drive out. Propping somebody up. Campbell got the run, got to the inside. Can he get it locked in? Just about. Little bit of an elbow. Gets the job done. Not quite.
And if he didn't get it done there, he would have had 2 more right-hand bends to go and secure the move, and that's why track position is so important and car placement down Pilgrim's Drop. Brian Borg, nothing he could do about that, loses out, and that puts him in the thralls of Philip Kraus and Ross Rizzo, who are now looking for those next places and to try and profiteer and gain just a little bit more out there at this moment. This is going on a little bit further back in the pack, because it has started to splinter out here at the front. 2.2, the gap at the front for Jared Filsell, third still on a charge at the moment, but they're forming little groups of 2 out there, because you've got the likes of McMillan and Gibbs and Willis and Gatterick as well, but we focus on those going on at the moment. In towards Druid's Corner we go. Willis there just keeping himself about 3/4 of a second behind Robbie Gibbs. It gives himself a chance really here to say that he can cover it, but first taker into the pits is Jackson Freer at lap 14.
And that'll be because he's got the damage there. He's just sort of stuck, and there's probably not a whole bunch that he can do. He might necessarily be the end of his race. We'll just have to sort of keep an eye on that one. But yeah, not going his way. But again, Leonard's continuing to climb forward, and don't forget, he's doing all the work on those setups and really working the machinery of this car. Back to what we were saying earlier, though, it's punch and counter punch. If you're going to cover me over at the apex, that's fine. What do we see? A lot of this sort of similar driving. Porsche Cup. Whenever you talk to drivers right over the world, what's the series if you had freedom to go and run? supercars. And the reason for it is, again, it's not just how you drive the car. It's not just how you set up the car. It's also the overtaking style. The reason Van Gisbergen has been so successful in NASCAR when he gets the opportunity, he's got the hardware underneath him, is because he outthinks the guys around him. What's the reason he does that? It's because you've got to be able to outthink the guys behind you. You're going to cover the inside, you can cover it. I'm going to give you a little bit of a whack at the apex and unsettle you, drive underneath you. Those sorts of race smarts, you've got to have them to be successful in this car.
Yes, this is the thinking drivers series out there, and you really do get a sense of it. There are so many crafty drivers out there who just know where to place a car. Right place, right time. Liana's driving it through the middle of Druid's corner as we go on board with him. Watching the back of James Scott in the number 6 machine, who's really come on leaps and bounds in the last 2 or 3 seasons and has really started to showcase that he is a top-level talent who can do pretty much what he wants to up at the top level, but down 4 seconds on the race lead at the moment. He won't be too pleased with that. He's very much having to look behind, and they can see how much they're attacking in there. All of the vapors and fumes coming out the side of the car as they now run all the way to the white line. Goes Lianas, trying to get that turn in. We talk about the fine margins here, and these drivers maximizing each and every corner. Rob Bowden making his first pit stop there as he falls to the back of the pack.
I reckon Leonardo's is going to come in. It's either this lap or the next lap. He's not going to run too far past the halfway mark. He's quick. And the biggest issue that these guys have got at the moment is that the field spread at the back is starting to just become bigger and bigger and bigger. They're at risk of taking a pit stop, dropping out in traffic. Whilst ever that's an issue, they're sort of going to run long. It's the guys at the back that you'll start to see pit first if that pit window is the case. If it's not, then Rayhan Leonard is going to be one of the guys who jumps out first. Another one...
Oh, trouble! Trouble for McMillan. He took a huge tap trying to get down onto pit lane. He got absolutely shot in the back by Robbie Gibbs, and Jack Widders is going to steal the place.
Whoa, that's huge for Widders, because if Widders can run away with it, he's still to the inside. And this is something these guys don't need. They're fighting, they're costing each other time, and McMillan's dived to the lane whilst all of this is going on. So not only is he going to get fresh rubber, these guys are fighting each other at the same time.
That was right in front of us in the commentary box, and Robbie Gibbs finds himself then losing out to Jack Widders, who took that as an opportunity. Thomas McMillan, we haven't talked about the merge going into the pits. You can see you've got to hang it right and hit the brakes, and there, no communication for it. Robbie Gibbs nowhere to go because he's committed and pulled up, and Widders has had a turn, and he's caught Gatterick.
And around goes Gatterick, so Gatterick's now going to try and recover that one. There's such a narrow little piece of the racetrack as well. You can just see him. Where's Gatterick? I think Gatterick might have just towed. I think he's done.
Yeah, I think that's the end of Dennis Gatterick's race there. He was trying to get himself reversed. He's realised how difficult it was, and he decided, you know what? It's very difficult. He actually is still out on circuit. It's taken him a long time to get around, so a few technical issues out there for him, but he's still going. But that was big. That was Robbie Gibbs into the side there of Jack Widders, and that was not what the doctor ordered from that. We'll take another look then as they go through. Gibbs down the inside. You can see Widders is trying to close the door off to get as much drive off of the exit there. So I think the car was very much always there, and Widders I don't think had enough spatial awareness.
He's cramped him. He's cramped him, and he's cramped him by, I reckon, about 5 centimeters too much. That's the minimum, and that was as tight as he was going to get on that corner as well. And that's racing. You're racing to those such fine margins. They got right up and on each other, and they raced each other door to door, and Widders has made a mistake by a matter of centimeters, and that's what it takes to be successful in this car. He's cramped him, he's given him the room, absolutely had to at that point in time, or else he was always going to go around if he didn't give him the room. But yeah, I think that's all been triggered because Robbie Gibbs and Thomas McMillan have just been at each other. And race car drivers, they're in a hot cockpit, they boil over sometimes, you add a little bit of a flame, just went up in smoke.
Matt Morris got into the back of Paul Young coming into the pits, and he's just jumped out back ahead of him, actually, by the time that he's been dealt with that. So some wonderful battles going out there, but Matt Morris spared his blushes by not speeding on the lane due to the buffer he had in front. Paul Young didn't take a penalty for it, so he had himself already slowed down. And we'll take another look at it here as they come into the pits. I'll tell you what, it's really catching these drivers out. You can see down into the lane, slowing up, bang, into the back of him. And he's very lucky he didn't cause Paul Young to get a 40-second speeding penalty. Yeah,
that would have been a disaster. So leader still goes through. He's got enough margin. Well, Down's going to run it long as well. Okay, so I definitely thought that these guys were going to pit early. I reckon traffic is a big problem for these guys this race, and that's why you're not seeing them dive on the line.
Wow. That is going to be important, as we now see. So we'll take another look at this. This is Philip Kraus, who in the middle of all of that tried to get the push done on Rain Campbell that won 4th position, and you're going to see this here in towards the opening corner. He throws it down in, gets into the side. They start drifting it through Paddock Hill Bend. Oh, that's brilliantly done and defended. Ross Rizzo tried to put himself into the mix. Campbell then has to leave the door open at turn 2. Philip Kraus didn't come here to make up the numbers. He came to race.
And to go from being so successful in IndyCar to a car where, you can't make contact or else you're losing really important bits of aerodynamic performance of the car, to a car where, elbows out's encouraged. Again, Philip Kraus, I've seen him in a number of cars over the years. He is just an all-star in every little bit of hardware, but he's at a soft spot for the V8 Supercar.
Yeah, he's got that little soft spot, and he's using that quite well here around, as he is now up into what is 11th position in this pit stop window. Wayne Burke dealing with Ryan Jones here. This is for 9th and 10th positions currently on the road. The DPR racing car of Ryan Jones up the hill in towards the Sheen curve and over towards Sterling's once more. Wayne Burke is sort of in that tier 1.5, tier 2 style of driver who can on his day find himself a good result, but you often find him in and around this sort of position looking to find these results, and I think he's having a really nice showcase of what he's been doing. He'll in fact dive into the pits now and say, you know what, I can only go 18.
Yeah, so he's going to pit it. Ryan Bettis, I think that'll be a speeding on pit lane entry penalty, unfortunately for him. Sorry, exit. It'll be pit lane exit penalty.
He's retired.
For Ryan Bettis. Yeah, job done.
So that's what happened. So he got one on entry, served it, got one on exit, and said, you know what, 2 penalties for me in a race like this. I'm last all day. And so that was the end of his race. Lianage up the hill is also Rain Campbell is in, and Steve Jansen is in. 14.2 from Wayne Burke, 14.8 from the likes of Steve Jansen. Something that often isn't talked about is those small differences in the pits. It's not as simple as just get the fuel in and how much we want to get into the car there, Scott. It's also about placement, as here comes Burke out of the pit and now looking to attack, and that is Will Brown, who is there trying to keep himself in play then, as he finds himself up a full 9 spots in this race at the moment, 28th to 19th.
Yeah, so I think Will Brown's actually not made his stop. So this is the traffic that I was referring to. So when Burke arrived out of the pits on the scene and had fresh rubber, he just went, yep, this isn't my fight. I'll get right out of the way. Matt Morris and Paul Young will be the next 2 guys you can see in the background that are starting to climb towards him. And I can see Ben Morris is about 4 seconds down the road from Thomas McMillan. And I think McMillan's going to range up on him. He took about 1.4 seconds out of him on the last lap. Critically to the leaders, 0.6, 0.9 of a second. Was that to Jared Philstell and Madison Down respectively out of Thomas McMillan, and that's with the damage on the rear end of his car from that contact from Robbie Gibbs. So he is making some headway, but he's gonna have to pay the price for it, and there's Kraus in line.
Yeah, private label, team hype into the pits and making his stop. He's gone on and off of the jacks. He just needs the fuel now, and he'll be back off and going once more. So that's what he's been trying to keep an eye out on, as we've kept the focus very firmly on Rehan Lianage and James Scott. They've dropped down to 127.6s over the last lap. By comparison, the fastest lap from Rehan Lianage is a 126.9, so they've only dropped about 8/10 of a second over the course of the laps that they've done, which doesn't sound like very much, but 7/8 of a second advantage over one lap. You sit down, you look at that, that's enough for you to jump. But of course, you've got to deal with the fact that if you take your advantage early by pitting earlier with the tyres, get fresh tyres, get the undercut, you have to pay the piper later on in the race.
Yeah, you certainly do, but the big thing about these cars is less grip than the Gen 2 chassis, less downforce than the Gen 2 chassis. What that means is the fuel weight is actually a bigger portion of the cars. Okay, so the first driver to pit out of the lead bunch is going to be Lianage, and Lianage will absolutely get the job done on James Scott as a result. So they've played strategy chicken up until the last possible moment that they possibly can. So what happens with the tyre in the car at the moment is that the tyre is wearing, and it is still drifting off, the fuel weight starts to offset, starts to cover that, and the lap time starts to recover as a result. So if you looked after your tyres, sometimes towards the middle and back end of the stint, if you're in my skill level, you weren't so quick at the start of the stint. You've got to get faster at the
Ooh.
end of the stint. So,
That's a quick stop by Lianaj, 12.1 seconds. I reckon he's underfilled that car slightly because he's been stuck so far behind some other drivers. You can see by comparison, Richie Stanaway, who spent most of the race on his own, 13.8 seconds in the lane. Blake Warboy, 16.1. This is a big play by Rehan Lianaj, and I think this is a play to not just leapfrog James Scott. This is a play to get past Madison down.
Yeah, this will be big. So he wants to jump a whole bunch of these guys. This will trigger it. Keep your eye on Jared Filsell. Guarantee it, he'll be in the box this lap. Is it to cover Lianaj off? Probably more so than Madison Town, but it's the right time. It's the right time to come in. So, you can't go too much longer than this. We're running out of time. Just keeping an eye on Blake Warboys as well. He's overtaken actually quite a few guys. He is starting to make some ground. So he has a potential to come back through this race and pick off some nice spots. Oh, he's going to go another lap. I think you're right. Well, they're both going to go long, all three of them. So the thing will be from James Scott, as soon as he saw Lianaj dive to the lane in behind him, nothing I can do. I've lost that spot. Newer tyres are worth that sort of a speed difference. Never going to be able to come back out of the box ahead of him. So he's going to go the opposite direction. He'll be keeping an eye on Dylan Rudd behind him. Rudd's probably the bigger key. As soon as Rudd stops, he's got enough of a margin in hand over Dylan Rudd. He can stop the next lap and still come back out ahead. But he's always going to lose that spot to Rehan Lianaj. Run long, build up a tyre offset. Do whatever you can to go in the opposite direction and give yourself something to fight with.
Battle of two drivers who have come in and made their stops. Ryan Jones then and Matt Morris going out there for what is 15th and 16th at the moment. A couple drivers who do need to make those stops. Thomas Freeman, for example, is one of those out there. Ross Rizzo would be another. And then your top five, of course, of Filsell, Down, Scott, Rudd and Gibbs, who all need to come in and make some service. Looks like that gap slightly opens up then here from Ryan Jones, who does miss the apex there through Paddock Hill Bend, but does gather enough off of it through the exit to keep himself in play. Behind that, you got Paul Young and Brian Borg, who find themselves there with a very fast-flowing Philip Kraus.
Yeah, Kraus is definitely making some time up in and behind these guys, but Ryan, like I said, Ryan Jones is just at the head of this one, Matt Morris, those two guys. So where do they all fall out in terms of your tyre life? Well, at the end of lap 16, this group of cars came in. It had Matt Morris in it, Paul Young, Brian Borg. Kraus went another 3 laps. He came in at the end of lap 19, slightly fresher rubber. He'll have pace at this side of the stint. He should be able to take a fair bit of time out of these guys, and in fact, took 9/10 of a second out of most of these guys on the most recent lap. Rudd's
in comes Dylan Rudd to make his pit stop from 4th position on the road. We expect him to fall behind Rehan Lianaj, but by how much is going to be the question as he goes up on the jacks, and we look at those times. Also in is Robbie Gibbs from 5th position and Ross Rizzo from 6th. It's open field now here for Rehan Lianaj in the south east of England, and he's got a mile on Dylan Rudd off of the exit. In fact, Rudd is going to fall out potentially into this next group because that's Richie Stanaway in this one as they go through. That's Jordan Ross who's side by side with him. That's Thomas McMillan who's going to be the bottleneck for them. Now watch this up the hill as they'll start trying to attack on a very vulnerable Dylan Rudd, but Rudd's got it covered here at Druids.
Yeah, it's the tyre temperature. Got to build some tyre temperature through these first couple corners. If he can hang on to this one, he's got 7 lap fresher rubber than the guys ahead of him. He's got 1 lap fresher rubber than Jordan Ross at the moment. So this is Ross's opportunity. If he's going to get Dylan Rudd, it's got to be right now whilst he's got that front temperature. Can he get the drive out of here? Out of 30s, up the hill? Not quite enough. This means that Dylan Rudd should have enough temperature in those fronts now. He should be okay.
Yeah, but I got to deal with Thomas McMillan now to try and get some places. So McMillan has had a really nice, underrated drive so far today, and McMillan has got himself just enough to cover. So Rudd in the middle of the group, he didn't want to fall back, but he's got the best tyre of them all, and so he'll be trying to use that to attack. But when you're stymied up as James Scott comes into the pit, you've got to try and find something that really makes it work. So you're now starting to see this is where you've got to make the clearance. You've got to make the clearance quick. Keep an eye on the tyres because here comes Rudd. He's looking for the move at the Jim Clark curve, the final corner on circuit. He gets pinched. Lianaj absolutely mollywops James Scott in terms of his stop. Side by side they'll go, and here comes Dylan Rudd, and you feel like he might have needed that lap because that would have put him with James Scott. Through down the inside, McMillan gets shuffled out, and through goes Jordan Ross, and through goes Richie Stanaway.
Wow, loses 3, but he's on the older tyre, who's always going to lose spots to these 3 guys. This is not who he was fighting. He was trying to keep an eye on Robbie Gibbs, and Gibbs has popped out well down the order compared to where these guys are. But did you see Jordan Ross nearly stuck the front end of his Ford Mustang into that Chevy Camaro's rear bumper? He just about had Dylan Rudd off. He dodged that barely, had to dive back on the brakes.
6 seconds for Rehan Lianaj over James Scott. That's more than enough to get to Madison Down. It might just be enough to get to Jared Filsell here. And this might be a play for the race lead by the youngster. In comes the race leader. In comes second place. So they now know that that is where they play. Lianaj, by comparison, is making his way now to Sterling's corner. And this becomes the move of the race. As we focus back on Jordan Ross versus Dylan Rudd, has Rehan Lianaj got the biggest undercut out there and has moved himself to profiteer to a race-leading battle. Filsell still on his marks, 14.5 in the box. He'll now start to go. Where's Lianaj? He's coming through now. He's coming through now. Filsell has merged out in front, but now he's got Lianaj to deal with, who has to strike now.
And have a look at how critical those undercuts were. He got 3 laps. My apologies. He got 4 laps to get out there, get aggressive on the tyre. He set the fastest lap of the race, 26.589. He's done all he possibly can. Now he's got to try and hang on to this one. Remember this car, new chassis, new aero profile. The big thing for these guys is that there's less draft. Used to be, once you latched onto that leader and a little bit of draft train, there was some dirty air, but you could stick with them. Now it's less so. Lianaj is going to manage this tyre. He's not fighting Filsell. His fight's with that car in the background, but this is critical. He had to go hard. Now he's got to save gas.
While all that's happened, Jack Willis has had a massive hit at Paddock Hill Bend from Robbie Gibbs going through, and I think we're just about caught it here, going down the front stretch, and this is how aggressive you have to be. He hits the brakes, Robbie Gibbs doesn't because he's slightly later, and he pushes him out the way through the opening corner. Jack Willis was not happy over the radio. He said, "Thanks very much, mate, for that. Not what I was trying to do," but ultimately troublesome. But look at this from Rehan Lianaj. This is the mark of a talented driver against arguably one of the most talented drivers that Australian sim racing has come to see. He is Mr. Australian Touring Car. He is Mr. Supercar as Jared Filsell, but now Rehan Lianaj looks to try and challenge for the kingdom.
Well, the big thing is they call him Jared Fuel Cell, and they do that for a reason. Very, very good on the fuel strategy. He's been outdone by the kid this week. How cool is that? But I just have a sneaking suspicion that Lianaj might be in a little bit of trouble. Scott's going to return the serve. He's going to get the fastest lap of the race. Now everybody else's tyres are up to temperature. They've done their outlap. Here comes the return of serve from the lap times from them. 26.440 from James Scott. The difficulty that he's got, he's about 5.7 seconds back off the race lead at this point in time. He's made ground to Madison Down. That's the undercut for you. But now can Down start to respond? Because I tell you what, Lianaj is hanging on to Filsell like you wouldn't believe. This is a phenomenal drive to stick with him.
If you can stay within 1 second here in the tow, in the slipstream, that is everything you want and then some to try and keep yourself going. You look around at everybody else who's trying to put their best foot forward, and they are doing what they can. Dylan Rudd, 26.6. You've got to look around. James Scott did a 26.4. Lianaj, 27 flat on that last lap, so 0.6 of a second slower than James Scott, for example. And when you got 0.6, that's 6 seconds. So you're looking around at it, 4.8 seconds to chase. The gap between James Scott and Rehan Lianaj was 5.4 at the line. So it looks like James Scott's trying to go for it. It's now a question of how quick's James Scott. Can he launch to Madison Down? And can Madison Down get the catch on Rehan Lianaj? Look at that gap now start to extend. Another 27 flat from Lianaj, 26.3 from Jared Filsell, who will now break away using that advantage to say, you got close, sunshine, but you didn't get close enough.
Now, have a look at the time for Madison Down, though. Did improve, new fastest lap of the race for him, but not the fastest lap of the race. Only managed, though, a 26.566. James Scott was quicker than him on his fastest lap, but now Scott's just a touch closer. This one may actually come down to quite a close race at the back end of things, but the big thing we've got to keep an eye on is that battle pack a little bit deeper down. Jordan Ross been able to make some ground up. He's still sticking with Dylan Rudd, and the thing is just broken away from Richie Stenaway. McMillan's now on the big old slide, and guess what? We're going to see another ding-dong battle, probably some more paint traded. Guess who? Thomas McMillan, Robbie Gibbs. I feel like I've seen this before.
Yeah, they're all there, and they're all wanting to decide how they get themselves all sorted. But the gaps you can see right now are a couple of seconds between these drivers. They've all got work to do, and McMillan finds himself there, 1.8 at the moment. I would say that is a very nice safety blanket that you want to use at the moment at this stage. Stand away a little bit too far away in the distance. Jordan Ross and Dylan Rudd are those who are looking to try and go out there and start attacking in this race. Big slide from Thomas McMillan going through at Dingle Dell, over the top through the Sheen curve and in towards Sterling's. Now you start to wonder here, when you get to this stage of the race, some would say it's the toughest thing to do, to be on your own and lapping, because you know how big the gaps are to the cars in front and behind and how Herculean the task is. Some drivers have a lot more of a sense of, I can really race. Those are true racers who can really stay and work best when they're following a car or battling with a car.
Yeah, and the other thing is, Robbie Gibbs just done his fastest lap of the race, so clearly he hung on to the life of the tyre. He popped out in a little bit of free air. Think about all the battles that McMillan sort of had. Both of these guys a little bit walking wounded too, so they both got battle scars on their tyres. And then have a look at this one. This one's still going on. Phil Kraus getting the elbows out. Blake Warboys has driven his way through the pack to come and join these guys for a little bit of a battle.
Philip Kraus then on the defence, because that is Paul Young that he's just made the pass on for position, so that will jump him up to 17th and +8 for the day so far, and he's only the second biggest mover because that guy behind him, Blake Warboys, he's up double digits for the first time. He's got 10 and he wants 1 and 1, he wants 11, but he's got to get past Paul Young if he wants to do it. Up over the top of Pilgrim's Drop and descending back down the hill again. He's not going to get the chance here into Hawthorns.
And I think this, from Blake Warboys, sometime throughout the season you want to challenge yourself. You want to ask yourself a few different bits and pieces. I think from Warboys, I think he had the potential to set some reasonable qualifying laps. I think he actually took the opportunity to go, no, I'm going to start from the rear of the field, I'm going to overtake. When this gets into the big season and some of the bigger leagues and all this experience is going to be quite critical. All the other guys are out there, they're banking a whole bunch of points. This for Warboys is not only about getting out there, learning to overtake and making sure that you're challenging yourself against the best opposition in the country, in the world. It's also about learning, but also, who doesn't love a good last to first challenge? Overtaking's fun. That's why we do sim racing, right?
Absolutely, we love the battle, we love the competition, and that is what we see. Rehan Lianaj dropped half a second on that last lap. The gap was 2 seconds over the line. At this rate, he is going to be side by side on the last lap of this race, but Mads is going to catch him with 2 laps to go if it stays like this. Rehan Lianaj, this is the big hold, and this is him trying to do what Madsen Down has struggled to do all season, and this is a pretty big statement to make against a driver like Madison Down here, Scott, if Rehan Lianaj can undercut in the way that Madison can't this season.
Well, it comes down to, and the critical factor in all this was, where was the hole on track? And for me, there was a few drivers that was just sort of looking at it and going, there's not really a hole, there's not really a hole. Well, Rayan Lianaj had nothing to lose. He was always going to be 4th. At worst, he was 5th. And have a look at where Dylan Rudd. Dylan Rudd went 1 lap longer than Rayan Lianaj, come out in traffic, didn't make any ground, lost ground, still tried to undercut the cars that were ahead of him. Didn't work out for him. Now he's got Jordan Ross coming his way. So there's a couple of big factors, and the last one that is so critical is Lianaj recognised, yep, I'm stuck, I can't really do anything, I've got the pace of James Scott, save the fuel. That was the big story. Whereas if you have a look at Madison Down, he drove that thing as hard as he possibly could to try and stick with Phil Sell, didn't work.
No, really didn't manage to keep himself in range, but at the moment, Jordan Ross is hoping that he can find that pass on Dylan Rudd, can gain that place, but Rudd in the all-pink machine is doing just about, and I mean just about enough to hold and stave off this challenge in his Camaro out there at the moment. The Mustang of Jordan Ross looking for drive off the exit here and to really attack up the hill, going over the top of Pilgrim's Drop and hoping that there's going to be a little bit more on the horizon, dropping down through, but he's stuck at that awkward stage of I'm a car length behind and I can't really make any much more progress to sit in and make that pass. He's got to be a little bit braver into these corners, and as we just say that through Westfield Bend, he just attacks it a little bit too much there, has a little boat of understeer through the middle of the corner and effectively has himself sailing back another half a car length.
Well, I think the big thing is how close he was to Dylan Rudd as he went in through those corners. These cars aren't as affected by dirty air as the older cars certainly were. You know, less air moving in and around them a little bit lower, sitting on the road, so they punch a smaller pocket through the air. And a lot of the design of these cars was about, okay, can we create closer racing? Drivers I've talked about the tires and how much they've been a problem in the real world, and that's something they've been going on with. But I think the product we've got here is quite good in terms of the racing and what's going on. But ultimately, I think that mistake from Jordan Ross was triggered by visibility. The next time we go through that chain of corners, you're right up on someone. We've got to get a shot of it because you cannot see anything. You're watching the car ahead, watching where they're braking, and just praying that they make the corner.
Right, here's the next thing to keep in mind. Rehan Lianaj, remember, got himself the huge runs that he did, and he's done everything he's wanted to. As we take a little look then, going through this next corner, that, I would say, indicates that he's trying to be as cautious as possible here, trying to lift in areas where he can, and because of the fact that he took, 2 seconds less in the stop, you're starting to look around and say, well, do you have enough to make the end? And he's got to keep pushing, otherwise it's Madison straight through. It was 1.2. It was only a 10th last time by, which was huge for Rehan Lianaj, but a 10th means nothing if you get to the Jim Clark curve and you've got nothing left in the tank and your foot's going to go to the floor and no power's going to come out the back.
Yeah, well, here's one of those differences between sim racing and the real world. The real world, you're going to have a little bit of fuel to get to the cooldown lap. You've got to manage that number precisely. You calculate it, you work off it. So their marker for what they use for an empty tank is slightly different to what we use. If it cops spotters and dies in sim racing, don't have to give up a fuel sample, don't have to drive the car back to tech, don't have to tick all these little post-race boxes. So you drive it until the thing runs out of gas. You run that number, you'll have a risk margin in your head of what you're working for. And remember, the best part about this time slot is at the back end of a week's worth of practice. You've done every official throughout the week. Rehan Lianaj, school holidays, has a lot of time, whereas a lot of these drivers are getting back to work as of this week, which means that they've got a lot less time to be in the sim. So Rehan Lianaj's big advantage is he's still, young enough that he's not having to do as much work. But he's been putting it, investing it in practice, running the numbers, getting all the sims that he possibly can. And big save, huge save for Rehan Lianaj. We're just on board with him. Huge clutch on the run down the hill.
Well, he has to. At that downhill section, he can use gravity to his advantage, and effectively, he mitigates any cost then as he lifts and coasts. This is a big fuel save game for Rehan Lianaj, and he is praying that he's got enough in the tank to get himself home, knowing that Madison Down, a driver who has been absolutely world-class for over a decade in sim racing, especially in supercars, is someone who could definitely make a statement here if he can get this result. What can the young wonder kid do? Welcome to Barney. He waves the white flag for Jared Filsar. I'm not sure anyone's going to stop him today, with a gap of 3.1, which will now extend out to 3.3 over the line. 27.5 this time from Rehan Lianaj. He's really having to go into the tank here and defend in terms of his position, in terms of his fuel. The good news is that Madison Down's not in a direct position to attack him on the final lap of this race. James Scott's charge has seemingly petered out as well. He doesn't have to worry about him either. You've still got 5th and 6th going on. Dylan Rudd and Jordan Ross, they're still going to be trying to sort out what they've got as they now start to run on through here, through turn 3 of Graham Hill, over to Surtees corner at turn 4, but it's still a car length for Jordan Ross, and he might just be staring at the back between now and the end of this final lap of racing here at Brands Hatch. The quarter mark of this season has been a critical one, has been an all-important one, and you've got to start thinking about who's got what and who's saying what, because we're just 3 corners away with Jared Filsell up on the top end of your screen, who has been marvellous, has been wonderful, and has proven, with the exception of Brody Kostecki, he has been in A or A1 position all season long. Lianaj, watch that gap. It is starting to creep on down, and Madison Down is closing himself in to about 4 car lengths. That might be enough if it does conk out, heading towards the line. Jared Filsell takes the win at Brands Hatch, but watch out for second. Lianaj has had a wonderful fuel save game, and he will hold that second place in what is a career-defining performance.
Yeah, and look at the margin that he's made up. When these guys crossed the line, remember, it was about half, 7/10 of a second. That sort of margin in behind James Scott. Well, he finishes 3.6 seconds off of Jared Filsell's lead. James Scott finishes 7.6 seconds off the lead. He's gained in the realm of about 4.5 seconds with that undercut. That's critical. Phenomenal job. Really good strategy sense from Lianaj.
Yeah, that's simply wonderful. We see the rest of the drives coming through. Paul Young is going to lead down through a group of Janssen and Taliancic then over towards the line. Quiet race today for Michael Taliancic. He's still got Jackson Freer. These will be the last drivers then who will make the finish, because Rob Bowden doesn't want the wooden spoon of those who all finish here. 0.3 of a second it was over the line, but making that progress through. Rob Bowden looking to try and get the drive. He doesn't get any out of the Jim Clark curve. And I think that Jackson Freer is just going to be able to hold on out there and do exactly what he needed to do there to maintain that 26th position. But let's get confirmation of result then here with iRacing and SimSpeed TV over with your iRacing C-Class Supercars Series. Jared Filsell makes his statement known with no Brody Kostecki. I will pick up the points and I will do my best to challenge. He wins by 3.6 over Rehan Lianaj and Madison Down, who will spot the final place on the podium. Good points haul for him today. James Scott will end up in 4th position ahead of Dylan Rudd and Jordan Ross, who remain stasis in terms of their places here today. Richie Stanaway will end up in 7th position in the Premier Racing car, with Thomas McMillan in 8th place, having a quiet, underrated drive. Robbie Gibbs found himself in the wars a little bit. He manages 9th, with Wayne Burke rounding out the top 10 in positions. Over the page we go. Jack Widders was the beneficiary, some would say, of the Robbie Gibbs School of Experience. He drops himself back a couple down into 11th, with Ryan Jones in 12th position, with Matt Morris also having a couple offs today, but still managing a very good and respectable 13th place finish. Brian Borg would start exactly where he finished in 14th, with Ross Ritto getting a very nice launch of 6 places. He would go and finish 15th ahead of Rain Campbell, and the runner-up in your iRacing IndyCar Series, your butt kicker IndyCar Series, Philip Kraus, there gaining 8 places over the race. Blake Warboys, your biggest mover, up 11, would finish in 18th from the back of the field, with Paul Young and Steve Janssen making up the top 20. 27 drivers would finish this race, and all of them on the leading lap, with Michael Taliancic, Thomas Freeman and Dennis Gatterick after his big spin down in 23rd for Synergy Sim Racing. Ben Morris, James Chastaneuf and Jackson Freer would be 24 through 26. Rob Bowden, the last finisher on the leading lap in the tanked Sim Racing car, with William Brown retiring the car 4 laps from the end, and Ryan Bettis having a little bit of penalty trouble, and his blackout OPR car would be down 17 laps, all things considered. Some wonderful racing then here from Brands Hatch. That marks a third of the season already in the book, Scott. This second third of the season kicks off next week here on January the 20th, and it will be at the Circuit de Nevers, Magny-Cours, which in terms of putting a supercar on it, you wouldn't necessarily think Magny-Cours and supercars go together, but it makes a wonderful mix of racing, and I would say it is almost a perfect fit.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a really challenging combination. The thing is, the car and the new generation of car wants a little bit more front brake bias when you go into the big straight line stopping zones. But then you've got these flowing corners, you've got your double backs, you've got your trail braking style moments. That wants a little bit more bite in the rear end. You're going to have to tinker with your brake bias, I think, throughout the lap. The big thing, no ARBs to tinker with. Then you got the curbs to hop at the back half of the lap. I tell you what, I do love Circuit de Nevers Magny-Cours. Always love driving there. Just the sim, it creates a phenomenal experience, but it's a tricky one. Get a little bit offline, marbles kick in as well. It's just a challenging circuit for these guys to go racing. I think they're going to put on another show again next week.
Yeah, and the only place to catch it is with us on iRacing and, of course, with SimSpeed TV. It's been a wonderful, wonderful round of racing again to bring over to you from the entire team, of course, of Jay Kennedy, Scott Rankin, and myself, Jake Sperry. What more can you say about Jared Filsell and the way that he drives? It was simply a masterclass of pulling away from the car in front, of just managing the situation, keeping that race lead. He simply never wanted to relinquish it, and that's what he does time and time again. He's a very tricky character to go and beat, but the closest who could was the youngster, Rehan Lianaj, who started to prove today that he can do things that other drivers simply cannot. And he is just going from strength to strength to strength this season, and he might be one of the drivers of the future that you definitely need to keep an eye out on when it comes to sim racing. We will see you with a little short jump over the English Channel down into Nevers. It's Magny-Cours in a week, and the championship now is as close as ever.
Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.